All right, so we're back for more video, right? So we kind of started the table up for our sci-fi room, and that really allowed us to kind of focus on the bevel tool and the inset tool, and more than that, just kind of the normal kind of modeling stuff we've been doing. We even saw how if you go to the little green triangle right here, there's this little section called normals, that if you turn on auto smooth and set it to about 85 degrees, it kind of does a better job of handling kind of making this all look smooth shaded, but kind of these areas kind of still have that sharper angle that we'd want it to have. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that if I go to 3 for face mode, this is a giant n-gon. Remember how we talked about briefly on the crab model that n-gons are no-nos? That's true most of the time. N-gons are not a terribly friendly or easy to play with polygon a lot of the time, particularly if it's got if an object's got a lot of curvature, like say a car, right? That's what we're going to do for our Project 3 when we come back after Christmas. And character creatures obviously have a lot of softness and organic curvature. So those kinds of models, you really want to have pretty much all quads. Maybe a triangle here or there is fine, but like pretty much quads. Generally, if you work with primarily mostly quads, you're going to be a happier modeler, period, right? Quads should be you should have a strong bias towards quads, 4-sided polygons. But in this case, you notice how these n-gons are flat. They're planar, right? Remember, planar polygons are flat polygons, right? It doesn't even matter what angle they're at. If I was to rotate this guy to be a different angle, that specific polygon, all the vertices relative to each other are still flat, right? Even if they're at an angle. So remember, planar really is just all of the vertices that are on a single polygon are planar, right? Relative to each other, they're planar. So n-gons, when they're planar and they're on something that doesn't have a lot of curvature, it doesn't do weird things to shape, it's not going to change shape like a character creature, which squash and stretch and you pose it. So n-gons you can kind of get away with on things like a desk or say like a wall for a building, right? Those are the kinds of places where if you need an n-gon, you're really not going to hurt yourself too much, right? Because it's going to stay planar, it's not going to change its shape at all, it's not where there's curvature, right? Like you wouldn't want a big n-gon here, right? So if I was to kind of go in here and just kind of go to my circle. Remember, select circle. If you go up here and you left click hold, right? Remember, there are several different tools in here. You have the select box, select circle, select lasso, tweak, right? And for me, select circle and tweak are some of my favorites, right? I actually have them because some of the mice we have here at Lathrop are 5-button mouses, right? Which are great. If you can get one, cool, right? You can add Blender really supports easily adding some other features like these to those buttons. I have that at home also, right? So remember, select circle is your kind of drag select one, right? Where you can just hold down your left mouse button and just move, right? So that's a great one. That's quite useful. If I was to select those edges and hit delete, dissolve edges, right? So remember, you hit delete like you normally do, and it just gives you all these options. Normally we dissolve faces, but if you're taking out edges or an edge loop, dissolve edges. And you see how it leaves this n-gon? And you'll notice that this n-gon, when we particularly start to look at it as in face mode, you'll notice it's getting weird right there. You see how it's kind of like denting in and creating this weird shape, right? That's because an n-gon does not know how to properly connect all those up, and so it's trying. You see how it's getting really weird there, right? This is what we call non-planar polygons, right? And when you dissolve a bunch of these edges, you get yourself in this position where you have this giant n-gon here on a corner where it's got curvature, and the shape's going crazy. It's horrible. It's looking weird. It's doing weird dents. So you could see that n-gons on something like this, just not a good idea. That's why we don't have them on our character creature, right? We would always want to keep it quads. So remember, guys, usually keep quads unless you're in a very specific circumstance like this. But in those cases, when we made that into a giant n-gon, it was non-planar because not all of the vertices were on the same flat kind of plane, right? So if you've got n-gons in an area where there's no curvature and they're flat, right, they're planar, you can tend to use them and they don't cause too much in the way of a problem. If need be, and you really want to minimize the n-gons here, you could always go to vertex mode, right? 1 for vertex. And you can actually decrease your radius size. So if you want your radius for your drag brush to be smaller, you can do that, right? And I can just grab these 2 vertices. And if you right-click, remember we're in vertex mode, right? Vertex concept sits in the menu. There's something called connect vertex pairs, right? Now we'll actually make an edge between those vertices. So if you did want to kind of minimize how many n-gons you have here, and not have this giant one here, you can select these vertices, right? One for vertex mode, right-click, connect vertex pairs. And you see how now we've got this as a quad. These are still n-gons, but they're not quite as big a one. Not something you have to do, but if you want to do it just to keep yourself in a slightly better position and have a little bit more flexibility, you might do it just to kind of make sure you have the n-gons kind of smaller. But remember, you can always kind of connect vertex pairs. And that's just right-click, right? We're just in vertex mode. Remember, that's just edit mode. And edit mode is 1, but it's also vertex. So it kind of by default takes you to vertex mode. And just right-click. Remember, whenever you right-click, it goes to whatever, if you're in a vertex, edge, face, or object mode, it'll bring up many of the tools. Not all of them, but most of the tools that you could use to do stuff there. And one of those is connect vertex pairs. And what that does is that really just takes those two vertices and makes an edge between them. And so now you can see that there's a quad here and a quad here, so that if we ever wanted to add a loop through there, we could do that, right? You'll notice here it stops, right? Because once again, n-gons kind of not terribly cool. They'll stop things like your loop cut from going through there. So keep in mind that n-gons are something you can get away with more with what we're doing here. But you still want to be careful with them, right? You still have to understand the limitations and some of the problems they're going to cause. For us, though, this will be good practice at understanding and seeing that we can use some n-gons occasionally on models, particularly if they don't go into subdivisional surface mode, or the n-gons are planar, and they're not in kind of curved areas, right? So I did want to kind of show a little bit of that stuff, just to kind of talk about that a little bit more as part of today's video. And what I want to do is I want to start to make some kind of futuristic table legs for us, right? Because this was kind of gives it a nice little rounded corner. Tabletops you can only make so futuristic, right? The legs will probably be the more dynamic kind of futuristic thing for us. So let's make those. But we're also going to try to keep things fairly angular, kind of go for that sci-fi aesthetic a little bit here, work more with the bevels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, in this case, we're already in one of our modes, right? So if you're in edit mode, one of the neat things is you can go to add, right? If you're in object mode and you go to add, it'll make it a whole separate object here, right? Which can be cool, and sometimes we'll want to do that. But in this case, I really feel like I like to kind of make them as this one, and then if I need to, separate them later, just because it keeps the center here, and that makes the mirror modifier work, right? You can kind of see our cursor is still centered on the 0. We're actually going to see a little more with that cursor on this project, right? This cursor can do some neat stuff. We didn't really need it that much on the crab, and there was only so many things I want to show you on the crab, right? So we'll kind of explore a few more tools like we're already seeing here, but we're not going to worry about that right now. But if you're in one of the edit modes, doesn't really matter which one. I could be in 3 for face mode, right? If I go to add, I can add another cube, and it puts it right in the center. And the nice thing is the faces are already all selected. But here's the thing. Remember how we were talking about select connected before? If I go to select all, it selects every face. I don't want to move this. I'm happy with this, right? What I want to do is I want to move this one, right? So if I select a face on this, and we go to the select menu, select linked, right? Remember, that's got that kind of bracket. It's by default set to bracket. I like spacebar. I think it's kind of cooler. Remember, all you have to do is right-click on the tool in Blender, pretty much any tool, right-click on it, and you could change the shortcut or add the shortcut or remove it. It's like that easy to add shortcuts, and pretty much any mouse button. I wouldn't change the normal mouse button functions, right? But if, like you have, like I said, if you have like a 5-button mouse at home or 6-button mouse, we've got those extra couple of mouse buttons on the sides. Take advantage of those. Blender can actually use those as shortcuts. But you can totally change all these. So I changed my selected link to spacebar. But by default, it's the right bracket, which is next to enter. It kind of looks like a parenthesis, but more square. And what that does, that selects just the connected polygons, right? So even though these are all one object, right, it's all that default cube, they're not actually directly merged to each other, right? You can have multiple pieces of geometry in one object item, right, that aren't necessarily one object. Like I can hit W for move, and I can move this down, and you see how they don't touch? But they are technically one object, right? If I go to 4 for object mode, You see how it's all one object, right? And that's what your outliner here is for. It kind of lets you see all those things. So when I go back into 3, I can select here, and I can just select linked, right? Remember, that's in the select menu, though. Select linked. Great tool. Use it all the time. And like I said, spacebar is a great quick key for it, so I like it for that. So at this point, though, I'm going to hit R for scale, and I'm going to scale it down a bit. And then I'm going to scale it down on the red a little bit there as well. Then we'll scale it a bit up on the blue, right? Kind of just bring these up a little bit because we want to get our leg going here, right? All right. So we'll kind of get that over there a little bit. At this point, I feel like I could probably separate it to something else. And we're not going to worry about making sure these are perfectly lined up and snapped. At least not on this project. I am going to show you more about the snap tools in Blender here, and they're pretty good, right? But oftentimes you can just eyeball stuff, and it's fine. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of eyeball line up the top so it kind of just insets a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably scale it in a little more. There we go. And of course, I can hit 2 for edge mode, and I can grab an edge. And I can hit W for move, right? Move this over a little bit. You can always see how we can kind of make a more angular leg here. Maybe this one will come in a little bit. It's kind of up to you on what you want to do with it. You guys can kind of do a little bit of your own shaping if you want to, right? I think I'll even go to 3 for face mode, just maybe move this face out a little bit too. Just to give that slight kind of cooler angular look for this table. Maybe bring this one in a little bit more as well. So remember, just W is on, and you can just keep clicking the different ones, right? The different faces or edges that you want to move, and your move tool's already up. And remember, you can just grab on the handle, right? And just move it along that specific axis. Now at this point, I really do want to start to take advantage of my mirror functionality on this guy, right? So I am going to separate this, right? So spacebar, because that's my quick key for select linked, right? Select linked. There we go. And I'm going to right-click, because we're in face mode, right? 3 for faces. Right-click. And remember, this brings up my face menu. And remember, one of those is separate, and we could separate selection. And that now separates it into a different object, right? There's a separate object here now. Now, at this point, if I want to, in object mode, right? 4, so object mode, right? Make sure it's selected, and you've got the lighter orange, because there's kind of like a reddish orange that technically means it's selected, but it kind of is in that fuzzy state, so I usually make sure to properly click on it again. So I'm going to go to Add Modifier, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mirror, right? And you'll notice that it's automatically mirroring over to the x-axis, right? But here's the thing. I'll turn that on. Of course, we always turn the triangle on. What if I picked Y also? And we don't need clipping for these because we don't need the center, right? So clipping is really more for like characters, creatures, cars, where there's going to be a center that's hollow. Here, these are not touching each other, so you don't need clipping on at all. But guys, this is one of the awesome things this mirror modifier does that a lot of you guys remember when we went into Maya for symmetry could not do that, right? So you can actually have both mirrored at the same time. So once again, once you really start to get into Blender, Blender's actually, in my opinion, one of the better pieces of software out there. I just love it now. Does some neat stuff that as I spent more and more time with it, really started to appreciate more. So the last thing I'm going to finish off with, because we'll do a little more on this in our next video, and we'll do some more beveling for it. I did want to show you guys the bridge tool, right? We haven't really had to use that yet. And it's actually one of your more powerful, more neat tools. So with the mirror on, right? So I just went back to object mode, right? It's 4 for object mode, and we went to modifiers, and we added the mirror modifier, right? So this is the gold mirror modifier, right? We just turned on our preview, and we turned on the axes we wanted to mirror on. In this case, we wanted it to mirror on 2. So I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. I'm just going to hit Q just to go to my regular selection tools. And I can select the face on this side, and it selects it on all the other ones. And I'm going to do a really quick right-click, because we're in face mode, right? 3 for face mode. I'm going to do a quick right-click, and I'm going to go back to Inset Faces, right? And you can drag in. You see it does that nice, clean, quick, uniform kind of boom, right? And now if I right-click, you'll see one of the other options in here is Bridge Faces. Now, the Bridge tool, what it does, and some of you guys from last year remember it, we're going to see it plenty more this term. In fact, it's going to be one of our most important tools when we build our car. As long as with Extrude, we'll do it on border edges, though. But what the bridge does is it takes separate polygons. They can be on the same model, right? But they're in different areas of the model. And what it does is it creates geometry to go in between them, like a bridge or a tunnel. In this case, it's going to be a tunnel. So we go to bridge faces, and it just kind of pokes a hole through there, right? But it's not a hole. The polygons are actually there, right? And so now we've got these cool table legs that are pretty much good to go for us, right? Now, of course, you can come in and you can bevel these. I'll save the next video for that because I still want to do one or two more things on this table before we're done. But I did really want to be able to show you guys how truly amazing the mirror modifier is actually in Blender, right? And you could switch it as you go, right? It's like once you really understand how this mirror modifier works and how powerful it is, it's truly impressive, truly impressive. But we also got to see a little bit about that inset tool again, right? And we got introduced to our bridge tool, right? Bridge tool is quite useful. One of those more powerful tools that you're going to find out there. Remember, it is in here, right? You'll always find bridge tools. Actually, it's not in there, that one. This is one of the slightly weird things about Blender. It's not a big deal. Occasionally, you'll find some things in here, but not in the right click, right? So you'll notice we have, like particularly when we're in face mode and we have a couple of faces selected, right? You'll notice that we have bridge as an option, right? But you won't always find them here, right? So just keep that in mind, is that you'll find most of your tools in here, but occasionally it's the right click that has them, right? And the right click is sensitive to the context, right? Like if I only have one face selected, you notice that bridge doesn't show up because I can't bridge one face to itself. So remember, the context menu brings up the tools you can use in that context. I actually use that the most, right? This is what I rely on primarily. And then if I don't find it in the right click, I can kind of go in here to find it, right? So I think that'll be a great place to stop that video. And we'll do some more later this week.